Stop down. These latest negotiations aimed at ending the Wounded Knee Indian occupation are in a teepee in the so-called demilitarized zone which surrounds the village. One of the most important demands to the Indians is the withdrawal of federal lawmen from the area. But the Indians are not alone in feeling they are being held hostage by the federal authorities surrounding Wounded Knee.
I don't know about that inside, but we better get out. How are you? How are you? Morning. Still waiting. Harold Bullock. Hi. Toda.
I think I met you yesterday.
Last night.
You want to get going?
Yeah, let's move in.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait a second. Why don't you...
Okay. Still smoking. How's that smoking?
It's not bad.
Nice, but I got potted.
Go out there.
We're making no plans to move in. We've heard the reports that certain individuals have indicated that they would quote-unquote fight till the death, and we've also heard reports that would indicate that that they would leave if some arrangements could be made that would satisfy them. So we're in no position right now to confirm either report.
Are you saying that you're at a stalemate?
No, because negotiations are taking, this morning we feel that negotiations have taken a new turn, and that is with the arrival of their attorneys. This is a positive step so far as we're concerned.
To the Indians who hold Wounded Knee, the occupation is now primarily a military operation. Any visible movement by the federal authorities who surround the village triggers an alarm that underscores the Indians' determination to control Wounded Knee. But it also shows how hopeless their fight would be in the face of any concerted government effort to win back the reservation village. The Indians' generally small-caliber weapons are no match for the force at the government's disposal. Although a final response to their demands is awaited, there is general optimism that recent negotiations with members and representatives of the U.S. Senate will result in productive change for the American Indian. Yet to be resolved is whether the government will try to retake the village before the Indians agree to leave, and what legal position the government will take on the entire episode. An Indian attorney, Ramon Rubido, hopes to negotiate both points with federal authorities.
These people are going to stay here. If they have to die here, they're going to die. This is a real serious thing. And the local bureau officials don't seem to realize it. They've been so used to pushing Indians around. They've pushed us around for years and years. Well, this is the last stand here. These people are going to stay until they get some justice.
If the siege of Wounded Knee is to end without violence, it appears the key will be compromise by the federal law enforcement authorities and the Indians. It is unclear if the Justice Department will negotiate the charges to be brought against the Indians who occupy Wounded Knee. Ron Miller, ABC News, Wounded Knee, South Dakota.
Most people are coming in at night.
Yeah. There are a lot of Indians that I thought didn't want to live. Some of those things. In the morning, in the afternoon,
Here he is.
Start shooting at that right.
Will APC come down? Huh? APC come down?
Just put it over the hill there.
Well, where the fuck's Milo? Hey. That's right. Do it south. How you doing? Hey, man, be over here.
Some of these people, sir.
Sound scared him off.
We need some goddamn discipline here. We need some people who know what a weapon's all about and a war is all about, handling these guns.
Last night, our internal security.
There's all the young bucks, all these the so-called warriors, or they think they're warriors, are only during daylight hours. Then they split and leave the older guys out in the trenches. Or go to sleep. Make sure they have a nice campfire and all that crap, you know? We have to say that every day.
Once you all down at the teepee, we're going to have a meeting inside there. So move on down.
We do need help. Getting the other people.
We want the security down there around it also.
Hey. Are you going in a meeting?
The first time I've been able to get in, I understand that my people have been asking for me for several days now. It seems that they've blockaded all the roads coming in here. We can't get a medical team in. A request has been made. A medical team from the Rosebud Public Health Service Hospital is ready to come in here right now, but they won't let them in.
What's the current, is this an impasse situation? What is the feeling you get from the Indians, and what is the feeling you get from those on the outside and the federal people?
Well, I think the federal people are just itching to come in here and annihilate the entire population. It's what it looks like. Sort of bloodthirsty, you might call it. These people here, they just want the right to be heard on their grievances, and we're going to see to it that they get a forum to be heard. I feel that the government is doing the same thing that some of the local state organizations did at Custer. They overreacted. And by this overreaction, I think they've revealed for the whole country to see that Indians are discriminated against and that the forces of law are unduly brought to bear anytime an Indian does something they consider to be wrong.
Seluruh, do you think that if any other group of people seized the town, the government would react differently?
Well, I wouldn't call it a seizure of a town. These AIM people were asked to come down here by the local people. And of course, the statements that have been coming out by the Bureau and by the Justice Department are calling it a takeover. It really isn't a takeover, as evidenced by the 10 so-called hostages that preferred to stay here.
What about negotiation concerning the charges that will be brought, obviously, against some of the people who are here in Wounded Knee?
As soon as we've finished interviewing the various people involved here, we're going to go into some meetings with the Justice Department and see what can be worked out there.
When do you see this ending? What will it take for this to all end here in Wounded Knee?
Well, when they quit brutalizing the Indian people.
Any group of people went into a town in Alabama where there'd been a problem and they'd been asked to come in. Do you think that the federal authorities
here and kill everybody? And don't think they're not intending to do it. They'd do it if they thought they could get away with it. Already they've violated the perimeter line. They're sneaking around with automatic weapons and all things like that. They've used tear gas. I just think it's a disgrace, I really do. It's a case of big government moving in on a bunch of helpless people, really.
Ramon, what's holding them back from coming out?
That seemed to stir everybody up a great deal. There was a great deal of, the people were very agitated as a result of that. And there was, when we walked outside at that point, there was a lot of movement. We saw a lot of weapons out there, weapons that we had not seen earlier in the afternoon. It seemed like a peaceful encampment. Now, the greatest majority of the grievances that were aired to me are legitimate and justified grievances, and I've been aware about that, and I never will. But I think it's a sad commentary that the Indians feel that that's the only way they can get any attention, that that's the only way they can get their grievances aired, and I'm sorry to see that happen as well. That seemed to stir everybody up a great deal. There was a great deal of, the people were very agitated as a result of that. And there was, when we walked outside at that point, there was a lot of movement. We saw a lot of weapons out there, weapons that we had not seen earlier in the afternoon. It seemed like a peaceful encampment.
Senator, what do you think about the merit of the grievances? Are these justified complaints that brought all this on?
The greatest majority of the grievances that were aired to me are legitimate and justified grievances. And I never thought that they were justified in the kind of violence and destruction that took place. I've never thought that, and I never will. But I think it's a sad commentary that the Indians feel that that's the only way they can get any attention.
You have Don, how are you? Sam?
Gentlemen, where will you be going from here, Senator?
Well, we're going to have a briefing at the BIA building first, and then we'll make decisions there as to what happens.
Do you know where you'll be meeting with?
I don't approve of the tactics of AIM. I didn't approve of what they did at Custer. I didn't approve of what they did in Rapid City. I didn't approve of what they did at the BIA headquarters in Washington, and I don't approve of this action here in Wounded Knee. But we're willing to listen to what they have to say and see if some arrangement can't be worked out to release the people that are being held.
Government and the Indian people. It's not in response, it's already in the works.
What are the big changes that have to be made?
Oh, I think that the BIA has to be made into a technical agency. I think the Indian people have to run it themselves. I think we come around to this thing of Indian self-determination. That seems to be what the proper solution is. That's what the Indian people want. I think it's time that the non-whites stop telling or the non-Indians rather, stop telling the Indians how to live.
Oh, yeah.
Are we late?
Senator.
No. Yeah, I know. That's how it started. Yeah.
Senator, when you go we'd like to go with you. There are some crews that are inside now.
How are you?
Morning.
Can I ask you a question? Well, I just want to ask you your opinion. Got more cord, Seaman? Yeah. What do you support the takeover of Wounded Knee?
No, I don't know. I don't know nothing.
What do you think about it?
I don't know. Can't tell you.
Okay. Thank you. What do you think about the takeover of Wounded Knee?
I don't know.
You must have some opinion about it.
I don't know.
What, are you afraid to say something?
No, I ain't afraid to say anything. I didn't hear all the stories about it yet.
Well, what do you think about the people taking it over?
I don't know.
Okay. Can I ask you about your feelings about the takeover of Wounded Knee?
My God, goddamn, I better not say it.
So what do you really think about it? You're an Indian. You must have thoughts about what's happening.
No comment, I don't think.
Why don't you want to comment?
Nah.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
What?
What do you think of the takeover of Wounded Knee?
No comment.
What do you think of the takeover of Wounded Knee?
I don't know.
You don't have any thoughts on it? Do you think they should be taking over the town of Wounded Knee?
No.
Why?
I don't know about them.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you a question. What do you think about the takeover of Wounded Knee?
No comment.
Why do you think it is that so many people don't want to talk about what's happening? A lot of people, when I ask them what they think about Pine Ridge, they say no comment. Why do you think that is?
That I wouldn't know.
Are people afraid?
That's probably it. I imagine that's probably it. Yeah. I just got a paper to send to my brother in St. Paul. 2 of his granddaughters are on this list, so I don't like it.
The list of hostages?
Huh? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't like what they're doing at all. I think it's terrible. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the takeover of...
We're going to win this war here at Wounded Knee, but it's only beginning. We have a war in Washington State. We have a war in Pawnee, Oklahoma. All these wars are next. For them, the FBI and the Justice Department better prepare some more plans for down there. We have won a victory from the Justice Department. They are pulling out. At this time, I want to remind everyone that our work has really begun now. We have yet to meet with the Interior Department, and they stated that as soon as a peaceful settlement was made here at Wounded Knee, that they would be in shortly, within a week.
Smile now, you're on candid camera.
My mother doesn't know I'm here. Edward, come out, but just can't come. Stop. Oh, I'm done.
How's you at?
Okay, we're going to have a powwow tonight after this honoring ceremony. Two guys that got hit yesterday. This has a lot of significance because that's the first time that Indian blood has been spilled on this soil in battle for almost 80 years. So we want to get all of the security people possible here. So we're going to run in short shifts, you know, maybe 2 or 3 hours so everybody can get a chance to come down and you know, participate in this powwow. Also in this this honoring ceremony he's having, I believe they'll be asking for flesh offerings. I don't know how much time he'll have, but I'd like for everybody in security, if possible, to give at least one flesh offering for these two guys that got hit. Okay? I'll pick 12 people at random first to go out on the bunkers. And then through the night I'll just be sifting through the crowd and I'll grab people and send them out so these other people can come in. Okay, as long as this ceasefire is in effect, all we got to watch for are these cowboys. And I told you last night what I want if you find some cowboys. Dustin. I'll bring one of them home to me, okay? I need a wall ornament. So things will be pretty lax, but we can't, you know, let it slide that much. This isn't the first time that they've offered us a ceasefire and lied to us. You know, we've been having ceasefire since we got to Wounded Knee, and they've constantly violated them, and we've constantly remained true to our word. So we have to keep on the alert. Okay, as far as weapons out there, I'm going to be picking people that don't have weapons. So when you go out there with your weapon, just hand it to the man, you know, that comes out to relieve you. And remember which bunker it's in, and when the powwow's over, go back out there and get it. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Car behind you. You're all right.
I don't think so either.
So I looked out the window and I said, well, for heaven's sake, who opened the store? And they're carrying things out, bringing things out by the carload, filling cars. I would dare say there were 60 to 75 cars outside and hundreds of people. And I was floored, just floored. And I wondered why the visit and why us this time again, because we were visited on March 9th. And but I didn't learn until after they came in and took us hostage. After all of it was over with, they were still hauling out. Then they told us that the only way that they could get back at the government that had not helped them was through us.
What does this do to you financially?
There is by no means total Indian support for the takeover of Wounded Knee. In fact, few Indians here will openly endorse the current tactic of the militant American Indian movement. Perhaps the series of no comments that can be heard veil either fear or bewilderment. Ron Miller, ABC News, Pine Ridge, South Dakota.
Sir, the people with AIM seem to say that the only way they can get any attention to their demands is through this kind of tactic.
Well, Senator Abresk is here as the chairman of the Senate Indian Affairs Subcommittee. I was formerly the chairman of that committee. Both of us have fought for Indians as long as we've been in public life. And we've tried to improve their conditions. We recognize they have legitimate grievances. But these tactics that are being used by AIM are not the way to move public opinion to do something about the problems of the American Indian.
Senator Abresk, will you be convening your subcommittee in response to their demand?
Not in response to the demand. I've already had plans to convene the subcommittee in Pine Ridge, Rapid City, and of course in several other places around the country to try to bring about a major change in the relationship.
Okay.
Oh, Dick, how are you? Fine. Let's go. Peter, how are you? I can't do anything about getting anybody through the lines because I don't have, I don't have any control of that justice. That's it. Well, I think so. I came out on the advice of the Justice Department. I asked them if they thought I could do any good. They said yes. So I came out. Well, I hope so.
Yes. A lot of our grandchildren are over there.
What? Sydney?
I really can't say, myself.
What do you think about it? Do you support it?
For the AIM? I think the AIM are doing good themselves,
And what about the takeover of Wounded Knee?
I really don't know about that, I should, they shouldn't do that, just, they should just, I don't...
How about you?
I think they're doing the right thing.
Wait a minute. You think what?
I think they do the right thing.
So you support the takeover?
I hope they do. They take over the place.
Why do you think they're doing the right thing?
I don't know. But I think they're doing pretty good.
Okay. How about you? What do you,
We're happy. What about you guys, Jack?
We all are. We all have to work for a living. I don't see why they don't. They just come around and mess everything up.
So you don't support anything that they're doing?
Nothing. No way. That'd just take and run the whole damn bunch out of here.
We got a man right here.
Leave us alone.
House burnt down. And we can't even go to work and move him in another house because there is no work.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
This man, his house burnt down, and his family is without a house, and I'm the housing officer here, and we can't move him another house because there is no work. We're laid off right now waiting to see what's happening here. So this man and his family sitting here without a home. What?
It could be that Wounded Knee has suffered a mortal blow. It may never be rebuilt. Sickened by what has happened here, influential tribal leaders would like to clean out all these buildings, recreate the atmosphere of 1890, and restore a little dignity to the historic site which means so much to the Sioux. Bill Werdum, ABC News, in Wounded Knee, South Dakota.
No doubt he's 22. No, the smaller places in that right, still got.
You know, what really would have expected if you were go up to the other. Yeah, they go up. Yeah. Well, that looks like two buildings. That was good? No, well, I know that was good. That's very good.
have to be less choosy about whom they take us.
We're going to talk in just a couple of minutes to Ann Kestner about Wounded Knee and to Lou Chiaffi about the massacre at Khartoum. In the meantime, thank you, Herb Kaplow and Tom Jarrell. We'll be back in a moment.
Anna.
The rebellions that marked the 1960s have died down, those on the campuses, those in the cities, but new rebellions have arisen. The most spectacular have been those by Arab guerrillas, originally against Israel, but now against practically everybody, and the American Indian Rebellion at Wounded Knee in this country. Here are some reminders. Now we'll ask the two reporters who covered those events to expatiate on them with us. Correspondent Lou Chiaffi is our Bonn, Germany correspondent, but that hasn't made much difference. After covering the Arab guerrilla massacre of Israelis at the Olympics, he was assigned to the Arab massacre of 2 American diplomats in the Sudan. Ann Kestner, for a lady reporter, has had some very unladylike assignments. The foremost was covering the occupation of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, which still goes on by the militant American Indian movement. Ann, was being a woman a disadvantage in covering that highly athletic story?
No, I don't think so. I had just moved from New York, where I spent much of my time walking everywhere, riding bicycles and fending off muggers, so I was ready for just about anything. But I don't think it was a problem at all. When we went into Wounded Knee that first night, we had to hike what we now call an Indian mile. We had an Indian guide, and he was wearing a feather in his hat, and he offered to lead us into Wounded Knee. We were going between the lines of the federal forces and the Indians holding Wounded Knee, and there was gunfire in the distance, and he said, it's just a mile over that hill. Well, it turned out to be somewhere between 5 and 7 miles, and it took several hours. It was about 26 degrees, and we were in prairie dog holes, and every now and then when the FBI would come with searchlights, we had to roll down a hill into a dry creek bed. It was a rough experience, but physically I think I was in good enough shape for it, and I never thought that I was in any greater danger than my male counterparts who accompanied me on the journey.
You know, what strikes me about these two stories is that it comes closer to our conscience than anything we've been talking about tonight. In both of these stories, obviously, we play the major part. Nobody thought by killing a chargé d'affaires in Khartoum that they could change affairs if nobody reported it. Nobody thinks that the Indians can solve their problems by occupying Wounded Knee. Do we have a guilty conscience about the way we covered these two stories, Lou?
That's right.
What are the Indians doing?
I think that the Indians who took over Wounded Knee are beginning something in this country. It is the newest movement. They had the takeover at the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington. There were other events, smaller in nature, leading up to Wounded Knee. I think that it is perhaps a revolution, maybe the beginning of another type of politics of confrontation. The Indians who took over Wounded Knee want better living conditions for their people, better schools, a fair share of what they feel is coming to them. And I think that there are going to be more Wounded Knees. The story itself was unique because in this century we've just had nothing like this, a takeover by armed insurgents. at a historic site like Wounded Knee, which was popularized in the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It's an unusual situation. It was, and it was very colorful. However, I don't feel that we were used in this instance. We were in there.
You don't feel the television was used?
No, I don't. I know that there have been articles about the coverage of Wounded Knee, comments that perhaps the press was used or that efforts were made by the Indians to manipulate us. But we were in there. It was a very colorful story, granted. You had Indians riding their horses into the sunset. You had Indians standing against the horizon holding guns and at many times pointing them at you, the reporters or whomever. But we covered what was there, and we also covered the other sides of the story. I would say that we would have been used if we covered just the American Indian movement side, inside Wounded Knee, and did not cover other sides and talk about the whole issue.
That great gag you hear there.
The logistics of Wounded Knee were really phenomenal. I had just come in from New York. I had been in Los Angeles about 56 hours, and the day that the uprising occurred, I had about 72 boxes and more than 5,000 pounds of goodies arriving at a new apartment. And of course, I got a phone call, and the assignment editor was doing war whoops, and I thought it was a joke. And he said, well, there are these Indians, and they're in South Dakota. And I said, South Dakota? I'm in Los Angeles. He said, well, you're getting on a plane to Cheyenne.
People in New York think of South Dakota as being right next to Los
Yes. That's right.
Yeah, like Bond is next door to Khartoum.
Right.
That's
yes,
right, yeah.
Across the Hudson. So we arrived there several hours later in a place called Rapid City, South Dakota, and still had to drive more than 100 miles into a place called Pine Ridge, which is the Indian reservation on which Wounded Knee is located. And then we had to hike in at night. There was no phone service.
How long a hike was that?
Someone said between 5 and 7 miles. I know it took us several hours, but there was no phone in Wounded Knee. There was one, and it worked sometimes. So getting our reports or information out was something else. I know at one time ABC in New York didn't know where we were.
That's right, I remember.
Yes, what happened to them.
Does that ever, out in the field in places like Khartoum and Wounded Knee, I would think it'd drive you wild. When I used to be a working reporter, you know, there's some guy in New York, and he's sitting on the desk, 7 West 66th Street, 7 p.m., and something happens about Wounded Knee or Khartoum. He makes a phone call. Next morning at 7 a.m., somebody calls him up and says, is there any film in yet from Khartoum or Wounded Knee? He says, no, and I don't know why. I called him 12 hours ago. And, you know, meanwhile, you're crawling along the prairie dogs, or you're trying to transfer from Cyprus to the guy in New York says, the minute he makes a phone call, he thinks you're ready, right?
Well, you know, as you know, well, no, we traveled with about 17 to 18.
For a short time, the American Indian movement leadership and some of the Oglala Sioux people had lost sight of the reasons we came here, which was to correct the situations that exist now on the Pine Ridge Oglala Reservation. The Bureau of Indian Affairs dealings with the tribe, the radical statements that Dickie Wilson's been making, the things he's been doing to our people have to be corrected before we can consider any type of withdrawal from Wounded Knee.
What are some of the specific things you want changed here on the reservation?
Well, we want things like the education revamped here so it's more responsive to Indian people, and it teaches our children that it's necessary to think and be Indian first, you know, and start with reading and writing and arithmetic after, you know, they've learned their tribal ways, their tribal traditions, and their language and history. There's other things that on all reservations we want economic control for the Indian people of their own reservations. Here on the Pine Ridge reservations, the economy is completely controlled by a few white ranchers and in collusion with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They completely rip off the resources of the Pine Ridge Reservation without any of the monies or benefits going to Indian people. All our resources, you know, generate a lot of monies, our land resources and our water resources, but the Indian people don't benefit by those things, and we feel that the Indian people that they should have control of those things, that they should develop them or not develop them in the manner that they want to do. We want that type of self-determination.
Carter Kemp, a CAMP, national leader of the American Indian Movement. Carter, what was the thought process that went into the rejection, at this point at least, of the Justice Department's counterproposal and the decision to stay on longer here in Wounded Knee?
Well, the counterproposal wasn't actually rejected. We just laid it aside because after a lot of talk amongst the AIM leaders, we realized that we hadn't begun yet to deal with the problems that brought us here to Wounded Knee. Now, we would like to get those type of negotiations started now and immediately with either the people from the White House that we met with in Washington, D.C., that was Frank Carlucci and Leonard Garment, or possibly the Secretary of the Interior himself, a aide from his office, or someone that has authority and control over the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Department of the Interior. We want the relationship of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the federal government with the Oglala Sioux people to change drastically. We want them to start dealing with the true leaders of the Indian people. That's our traditional chiefs that the Oglala Sioux people have. This is what the government promised to do in its Treaty of 1868, and the Secretary of Interior has that power to bring this about immediately. He could do this by suspending the tribal constitution, thereby stopping the work of the tribal council and calling for a referendum vote throughout the Oglala Sioux nation. And that way he'd find the true leaders of the Oglala Sioux, and they would then start building a new constitution and a new relationship with the federal government. Until this is brought about, the American Indian movement, the Oglala Sioux people have made a firm decision never again to waver from the issues that brought us here and to stay here until such time as the government either takes us out forcibly, kills us all, or agrees to our position and with some sort of meaningful negotiations with the Oglala Sioux people.
Do you consider this a toughening of your position?
Oh, we think it's a return to the position that brought us here. We came here for these specific issues, and for that short time, 2 days, I think, because of dealing with the lawyers on the side of the government and dealing with the lawyers on our side, we were thinking totally in the legalistic terms of whether or not the members of the Oglala Sioux tribe and the American Indian movement were going to be charged with these very serious crimes. But now we've realized that it doesn't matter if we're charged with these crimes at all.
You feel this is a critical point for the American Indian movement?
Yeah, we said that before we came here. We wouldn't come here unless invited by the Oglala Sioux tribal leaders and the chiefs of Oglala Sioux. We said that if we do come here to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, it's going to be the supreme test for AIM. AIM is going to either show that they are needed in Indian country, or else there will be no longer any use for AIM. We see this as the test for the American Indian movement, and we'll either win here or we'll disband.
Okay, I'm talking.
Look at him.
Yeah.
Put the mic next to you.
Why am I doing that? Of course. I'm sorry. It struck me at some point during the negotiations that in fact what was happening, people were losing sight of why they came here, and there seemed to be a division almost between AIM and the Oglala Sioux. Just an apparent, break in terms of you guys being down here, they're up there, and we're all concerned now about how these guys get out. Mm-hmm. And I understand where you're coming from, I think. I guess we ought to get a cutaway also.
Yeah, I agree with everything. The AIM leaders are of one mind with the Oglala Sioux, and we hope to carry on from there.
I'm going to do 3 sound questions. How's the relationship between you people and those up there? Is it ever strained? And I'm not
Yeah. It gets strange. You guys doing down there in that trailer house when you all these meetings? Are you working anything out for your people or what? And we have to explain.
Just asking them.
Go ahead.
Cutting purposes. Why did you reject the Justice Department counterproposal, which would have allowed you to leave Wounded Knee? Do you consider this a toughening of your position? Do you think this is a crucial point for the American Indian movement? What are some of the specific things that you want changed here on the reservation?
Well, as a member of the American Indian movement, I can only say what AIM's goals are nationally for Indian people, and it relates somewhat to the Oglala Sioux Reservation. To get specific, you'd have to ask one of the tribal leaders here. There's $12 million a year generated in money for the white ranchers and white people here on this reservation. With that money, the Indian people here could begin enjoying some of the benefits of the of civilization as America knows it, and they could begin building their own lives without having to depend on the federal government for welfare. And it's that way across the nation. Without the encroachment of a fast-moving civilization, which we don't think is going to last long anyway.
So we're talking about Indian solutions for Indian problems.
That's exactly what we're talking about. The 20-point program that the activist people of the United States, activist Indian people of the United States, wrote to take to Washington, D.C. while we were in Minneapolis, laid it out, word by word and paragraph by paragraph to the federal government exactly what is needed in Indian country, and it dealt with all the points, from the abolishment of the Bureau of Indian Affairs right down to the way our people should be treated or not treated in penal institutions.
What are some of the specific things you want changed for the American Indian? Voice track. The Indians who occupy Wounded Knee intend to stay longer, but they may have lost their best chance to leave the village non-violently. The Indian leadership put aside a Justice Department proposal which would have allowed them to leave Wounded Knee with no arrests, pending the findings of a federal grand jury. The Indians intend to stay because they now feel their demand for The Indian leadership put aside a Justice Department proposal which would have allowed them to leave Wounded Knee with no arrests, pending the findings of a federal grand jury. The Indians intend to stay. I'm sorry, stop there. Rolling. The Indian leadership put aside a Justice Department proposal which would have allowed them to leave Wounded Knee with no arrests, pending the findings of a federal grand jury. The Indians intend to stay because they now feel their demand for productive change has not been met. Ron Miller, ABC News, Wounded Knee.
got back in here. It was like this. Right on. They had about half a dozen knapsacks. That's about 3 units with it. They're still in it. Somebody ought to go up there with a car and take them all in. I was going to put a sign over the door that said Wounded Knee Trading Post, 100% discount. That's what we should have.
In terms of ending the siege of Wounded Knee, if the senators that you've had contact with carry through on the promises that they've apparently made in terms of your demands, what else has to be resolved?
Well, one, the military situation here has to be resolved, and the fact that are they going to bring charges against us? If not, let us know. We want to negotiate as soon as our attorneys arrive. And if they are, what charges? A ballpark figure on the bail. Who's going to be charged? Because at least the leadership here do not want the people charged. The leadership will take full responsibility if they feel that there's a necessity to charge us.
And if in fact the Justice Department and the Indians here holding Wounded Knee cannot agree on the military situation, the charges that will be brought against you, what will you do then?
Well, we plan to stay here. We've bet our lives that something meaningful and in the course of history in Indian affairs has been changed because we have thrown our lives on the line, and that's still a fact. All of us here have put our lives on the line, and we're prepared to die, if necessary, to create this change.
You're generally agreeable, however, it seems, to what Senators Zabaresk and McGovern and the representatives of Fulbright and Kennedy have promised they will attempt to do in terms of that change that you seek.
Yes, in terms of what change they had, some of it's long range, very long range, and others can be done shortly. Now also there's the fact that the administration hasn't responded at all to this except in a military fashion. You see what I mean? So that points us where they're at. So our only hope lies with the legislative branch. The Indians' hope lies with the legislative branch of government.
So when you talk in terms of the military situation, you're talking about the federal marshals and the FBI and the local and state police that now circle Wounded Knee.
And the armored personnel carriers with the 50 caliber machine guns. That's against the Geneva Convention, by the way. And also the vigilantes that are now working with the feds. They have bulletproof vests and flares with grenade launchers. And they are also part of the encirclement here. So the white vigilante ranchers around here are as much as part of the military situation as anyone else. Okay. Those Indians trying to cover up here, so I don't plan on doing that. But
when could this end? I'm not recording now. Go ahead.
When could it end? These feds get off the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And allow us, if we so choose, to go home. But I live in Porcupine, just 8 miles from here.
Are you saying then that, I can't ask you a question, but it would seem to me that certainly the federal people aren't going to move off the reservation until there is some kind of conclusive settlement of the demands you've made to the legislative branch?
And we got 80 other people around the reservation that want to come in immediately. Who've gone and support the Union Centrali, the United States. And until that issue is also settled, let people come in. So right now we're at an impasse, really.
Hi there.
That's why we put this up, to negotiate. We didn't quite understand yet. So we'll remove our teepee back to the grounds, right in front of the sweat lodge.
Stand up. If you'd like, I can start it a couple of different ways to work with